I need to be upfront with you about something that happened a few years ago. This isn't a story I tell often, because revisiting it means touching a part of my life I had to burn down to the ground just to survive. But it's a true story, and it's mine. The smell of Fixer always calms me, that sharp, acidic scent clinging to the air in my dark room. It's the smell of control of creation. I was holding a photograph of him, tongs dripping, watching his face emerge from the blankness of the paper submerged in the chemical bath. It was a good portrait, maybe my best. The light from the window of my Brooklyn apartment catching the kindness in his eyes, a kindness I had mistaken for a soul. My phone, left on the dry counter by the door, began to vibrate. It didn't stop. A single insistent buzz that vibrated through the floorboards, a hornet trapped in a jar. A text from my friend Sarah cut through the silence. It wasn't words, just a link. I clicked it, and in the eerie red glow of the safe light, my entire world dissolved. There, on a public forum I'd never heard of, were my body, my face, our most intimate moments, twisted into something ugly and cheap. And beneath a photo of me sleeping, a caption written by the man in the portrait still developing in my hands. Round 1. More to come. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. His name was Leo. We met at a gallery opening in Chelsea. I was there professionally, shooting the event for a magazine, and he was there as a guest of the artist. He moved with the easy, predatory grace of a man who'd never been told no. He worked for a hedge fund, one of those aggressive firms in Midtown Manhattan where they probably had gold-plated staplers and shouted things like liquidate and leverage into their phones. He was everything I wasn't. I lived in a world of shadow and light, of nuance and patience. He lived in a world of numbers, of stark profit and loss. Maybe that's what drew me in. The opposition. He was fascinated by my work, called my photography haunting, and said I had an old soul. He'd come over to my apartment in Carroll Gardens, a floor-through in a historic brownstone, and watch me work in my makeshift darkroom. He'd sit for hours, just watching, his silence a stark contrast to his usual boisterous confidence. Our love affair was a wildfire. It was all-consuming, a blur of late nights in the city, weekends upstate, and a passion so intense it felt like it could power the entire eastern seaboard. He made me feel seen in a way no one else ever had. He loved my ambition, or so I thought. He'd brag to his friends about my latest gallery show or the spread I shot for Vogue. He bought me a rare 1958 Leica M2, a camera I'd only dreamed of touching, let alone owning. It felt like we were building a world together, brick by brick. A world that was beautiful, exclusive, and safe. But there were cracks, of course. There are always cracks. I just chose to ignore them. Little things. The way his compliments sometimes felt like ownership. How he'd get a little too quiet when I had to fly to LA or Paris for a shoot. A subtle possessiveness that masqueraded as affection. He'd call it missing me, but it felt more like he was taking inventory. The breakup was as sudden and violent as the love affair had been. It wasn't one big thing, but 1,000 small cuts. He wanted me to stop taking international assignments. He suggested I could just focus on portrait work, on clients he could bring me from his world. He wanted to contain me, to put my art, my soul, in a gilded frame and hang it on his wall. When I refused, when I told him my work was my life, not an accessory to his, something in him broke. The kindness in his eyes, the one I'd so carefully captured on film, curdled into something cold and unfamiliar. He told me I was ungrateful, that I was choosing my little hobby over a future with him. The fight was brutal, ending with him packing a bag and slamming the door so hard a framed photo of us on the wall crashed to the floor, the glass shattering. 2 days later, my phone started buzzing in the darkroom. The first wave was shock. Pure, unadulterated disbelief. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook so badly I dropped the tongs, splashing developer onto my jeans. I scrolled through the page. There were dozens of photos. Some were selfies we'd taken in bed, goofy and intimate. Others were photos I hadn't even known he'd taken. Moments where I was vulnerable, undressed, asleep. He'd written captions for each one, crafting a narrative of a promiscuous, unstable woman. He twisted our private jokes into cruel insults, our tender moments into evidence of my supposed depravity. He was methodically, systematically desecrating our shared history. My body wasn't mine anymore. It was a public spectacle. My identity had been stolen and replaced with a grotesque caricature he'd painted for the world to see. Then came the second wave, the digital flood. My DMs on Instagram, my messenger, my email, they became conduits of poison. Strangers were sending me vile messages. Men were sending me unsolicited graphic pictures. Some people, friends of his I barely knew, accused me of driving him to this, as if his monstrous act was a justifiable reaction. My own world turned on me. I got an email from a client, a very conservative family I was scheduled to shoot for a holiday card. The subject line was just my name. The email was short. Maya, we have to regretfully cancel our session. We've been made aware of some deeply unprofessional content online, and we can't have that associated with our family. We wish you the best. The check I had been counting on to make rent vanished. That was the first brick he pulled from the life I had built. I had a sickening feeling it wouldn't be the last. I unplugged my Wi-Fi router, turned off my phone, and sat alone in the red glow of the dark room, the silence now more terrifying than the noise had been. The portrait of him was still floating in the developer tray, his smiling face a ghostly specter in the chemical bath, mocking me. The man I loved had become a monster, and he had just set my world on fire. And the worst part was, I had no idea how far the flames were going to spread. I spent the next 48 hours in a self-imposed prison. My apartment, once my sanctuary, felt like a glass cage. I drew the blinds, the midday sun casting striped shadows across the floor like prison bars. Every creak of the floorboards in the hall, every siren wailing down Court Street made my heart hammer against my ribs. I felt like they were coming for me. Who, I didn't know. The mob from the internet? The judgment of the world? I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just drifted from room to room, a ghost in my own life, replaying every moment, every post, every vile comment in my head. The violation was a physical thing, a sickness that had taken root deep in my gut. He hadn't just posted photos. He had curated an exhibition of my humiliation, and he was the gleeful, celebrated artist. On the third day, I forced myself to go online. I had to know the scope of the damage. It was so much worse than I imagined. He hadn't just posted to one obscure forum. He had weaponized our entire digital life. He had created a dozen different anonymous accounts on Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram, all dedicated to spreading the images. He was meticulous. He tagged my professional accounts, my gallery, even photographers I admired and had worked with. He was poisoning every well, ensuring that anyone who searched my name would find his grotesque creation first. Then I found the emails. He'd created a dummy email address and sent a mass mailer. The recipient list was a meticulously crafted inventory of my life, my clients, past and present. My mother, my father, my younger sister, Chloe, who was a freshman at NYU, my booking agent, the editor at the magazine who'd given me my first big break. The subject line was chillingly professional, regarding the photographer Maya Lin. The body of the email was simple. It contained a link to the main forum and a single sentence. I felt you should know who you're working with. The sheer malice of it knocked the wind out of me. This wasn't a heartbroken man lashing out in a moment of pain. This was a campaign. This was a calculated, strategic demolition of my career and my personal life. He wasn't just trying to hurt me. He was trying to erase me. I saw him on his Instagram, a public profile. It was like looking into an alternate reality. He had posted a story just hours before, clinking champagne glasses with his finance buddies at some rooftop bar in the meatpacking district, the glittering Manhattan skyline behind them. The caption read, "Good riddance to bad rubbish. Onwards and upwards," he was celebrating. He was toasting his victory while I was hiding in the dark, my life in ashes around me. The injustice of it was a physical blow. He was out there, living his life, untouched, triumphant, while I was here, branded, shamed, and professionally ruined. The calls from my family were the hardest. My dad, a quiet man of few words, was so full of rage he could barely speak. My mom just sobbed, asking what I did to make him so angry, a question that felt like a hot poker to the chest. But it was the call from my sister that shattered what little composure I had left. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Someone had printed out one of the photos and taped it to her dorm room door. She was 19. She was just a kid. She'd had to go to her RA, humiliated, to have it taken down. "Maya, what do I do?" She wept into the phone. "Everyone's whispering. Everyone's looking at me." And in that moment, listening to my sister's pain, a pain he had inflicted on her. Just to get to me, something inside me shifted. The deep, marrow-deep shame that had paralyzed me began to burn. It wasn't a hot, chaotic fire, but a cold blue flame of pure, unadulterated fury. The fear was still there, but now it had a purpose. It was fuel. He had brought this war to my family. He had made my sister collateral damage in his sick game. And he was going to learn that he had picked a fight with the wrong woman. I hung up the phone, my hands steady for the first time in days. I walked to the window and threw open the blinds, letting the harsh, unforgiving sunlight flood the room. He thought he had all the power. He thought his money and his arrogance made him invincible. He was about to find out how wrong he was. My grief was hardening into a diamond-sharp resolve. He wanted to ruin my life. I was going to take his. The next morning, I woke up with a singular purpose. The fog of despair had lifted, replaced by a crystalline clarity. Leo saw me as a victim, a casualty of his bruised ego. That was his first mistake. My entire career as a photographer was built on seeing what others missed. The subtle shift in light, the fleeting expression, the hidden vulnerability in a subject's eyes. I decided to turn that lens on him. I spent the entire day in front of my laptop, not looking at the vile things he'd posted, but researching him. I went through his social media, his LinkedIn profile, the website for his hedge fund, Sterling Ashworth Capital. It was a fortress of wealth and power, with an address on Park Avenue that screamed untouchable. Their About Us page was filled with corporate jargon about integrity, trust, and ethical stewardship. It was a joke. I typed revenge porn lawyer NYC into Google. The results were overwhelming, but one name kept appearing in articles from the New York Times and Forbes. Jessica Thorne. Her website was minimalist and severe. No smiling headshots or cheesy slogans. Just her name, her credentials, and a list of multi-million-dollar verdicts. Her specialty was described as complex civil litigation involving digital harassment and reputational damage. I sent her an email, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I laid out the entire sordid story, attaching the links, the screenshots of the emails, the client cancellation. I didn't sugarcoat my devastation, but I ended the email with a single sentence that came from the core of my new resolve. I'm not interested in a settlement. I'm interested in ruination, she replied in under an hour. My office. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. Jessica Thorne's office was in a sleek, anonymous glass tower near Columbus Circle. It was the kind of building designed to be intimidating. Inside, her office was sparse and modern, with a floor-to-ceiling window offering a commanding view of Central Park. Jessica herself was in her late 40s, dressed in a sharply tailored gray suit, with dark hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to pull the skin taut across her cheekbones. She had eyes that didn't just look at you. They scanned you, assessed you, and filed you away. She didn't offer coffee or pleasantries. She just gestured to the chair opposite her desk. I've reviewed what you sent me, she said, her voice a low, precise hum. It's bad. One of the more malicious, systematic cases I've seen. She paused, her eyes locking onto mine. But it's also sloppy. Men like him, men with colossal egos, they always get sloppy. They think their power is a shield. They're wrong. It's a target. She laid it out for me. The strategy wasn't just defensive. It was a full-scale assault. We file a civil suit, she explained, ticking points off on her fingers. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Public disclosure of private facts. Defamation for the lies he wrote. And most importantly, copyright infringement. I must have looked confused. You're a professional photographer, Maya. Did you take any of these photos yourself? I thought about the hundreds of pictures on my hard drives. The selfies, the portraits, the candid shots. Yes, I whispered. A lot of them. A thin, predatory smile touched Jessica's lips. Good. As the photographer, you own the copyright. Every single time he posted one of your photos, he broke federal law. Each infringement carries a statutory damage of up to $150,000. We're not just suing him for hurting you. We're suing him for stealing from you. The cost was going to be astronomical. My savings would be wiped out in the first few months. Jessica was blunt about it. He'll hire a team of corporate pit bulls from a white shoe law firm. Their strategy will be to bleed you dry, to bury us in motions, delays, and paperwork until you can't afford to fight anymore. That's how these men win. I looked out the window at the vast expanse of the park, at the city that felt like it was swallowing me whole. For a moment, the fear returned, a cold wave of doubt. Could I really do this? Take on a man with seemingly limitless resources? Jessica must have seen the flicker in my eyes. Here's the thing about men like Leo, she said, leaning forward. Their entire identity is built on two things: their money and their reputation. He's already damaged your reputation. So we go after his, and then we go after his money. We go after it all. We will subpoena his employer. We will depose his colleagues. We will force him to spend every waking moment and every available dollar fighting this. We will make his life a living hell. But you have to be ready for the fight of your life. Can you do that? I thought of my sister's tear-streaked face, of my father's helpless rage. I thought of Leo, toasting with his friends, basking in his cruelty. I turned back from the window and met Jessica's gaze. The fear was gone, burned away by the cold certainty that had settled in my soul. Yes, I said, my voice clear and steady. Let's burn it all down. The lawsuit landed on Leo's desk a week later. Jessica didn't pull any punches. The filing was a work of art, a 50-page document that laid out Leo's campaign of terror in meticulous, excruciating detail. We sued for $10 million. It was an audacious number, designed not just to compensate me for the damages, but to send a message. This was not a nuisance suit. This was a declaration of war. His response was swift and predictable. He hired a top-tier law firm, the kind that advertised in the Wall Street Journal. Their first move was to file a motion to dismiss, claiming the suit was frivolous and an attempt at extortion. They simultaneously sent me a cease and desist letter, a laughably ironic document accusing me of harassing him. They painted me as the scorned, hysterical ex-girlfriend, a narrative Leo was pushing hard on his social media, where he'd taken to posting vague inspirational quotes about rising above the drama and cutting out toxic people. The discovery phase was brutal. It's the part of a lawsuit where both sides exchange information, and Leo's lawyers used it as a weapon. They demanded every email I'd ever sent him, every text message, every photograph on my hard drives. Their goal was clear: to find something, anything, they could use to slut-shame me, to paint me as promiscuous or unstable. The deposition was the worst. I had to sit in a sterile conference room for 8 hours while Leo's lead attorney, a man with a smug face and soulless eyes, grilled me about my personal life. He asked questions designed to humiliate me, forcing me to speak about the most intimate moments of my relationship in front of a court reporter, with Leo sitting at the other end of the table, looking on with a smirk. But I was prepared. Jessica had warned me this would happen. I answered every question in a calm, flat monotone. I refused to cry. I refused to get angry. I gave them nothing. I looked at Leo, at his smug, confident face, and I felt nothing but a cold, driving purpose. He thought this would break me. He didn't realize it was forging me into steel. Meanwhile, Jessica was waging her own campaign. She was a master of legal warfare, and she began to bleed him. She filed motion after motion, subpoena after subpoena. Every time his lawyers filed something, she'd respond with a mountain of paperwork that would take them weeks to sort through. We subpoenaed his phone records, his bank statements, his credit card bills. Every motion, every response, every hour one of his high-priced lawyers spent on the case was costing him a fortune. My savings were gone, and I was racking up debt, but I could see the cracks starting to form in his armor. He had to sell some of his stock portfolio to cover his legal fees. He stopped posting his lavish lifestyle on Instagram. The champagne rooftop photos were replaced by anxious-looking selfies from his office. He was feeling the pressure. The turning point, the masterstroke of Jessica's strategy, came 6 months into the legal battle. We filed a subpoena for the servers and all electronic devices at his hedge fund, Sterling Ashworth Capital. We argued that Leo had likely used his work computer and company email to distribute the images and harass me, which would make the company itself potentially liable. It was a long shot, legally speaking, but that wasn't the point. The point was the bomb it would drop inside his fortress. Hedge funds like his are pathologically secretive and risk-averse. They operate in a world of immense wealth and paranoid discretion. The last thing they want is to be dragged into a messy public lawsuit involving revenge porn and a rogue employee. Jessica sent a copy of the subpoena directly to the head of human resources and the firm's chief compliance officer. It was like putting a stick of dynamite in their mailbox. We didn't know what would happen, but we knew they couldn't ignore it. We had officially brought the war to his front door. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Jessica. They put him on administrative leave. she said, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. Effective immediately. They're launching an internal investigation. I closed my eyes, a slow smile spreading across my face. The first major crack in his empire had appeared. The king was being questioned in his own castle. The news of his suspension sent Leo into a panic. The steady, arrogant stream of legal filings from his lawyers slowed to a trickle. He started calling me. Blocked numbers, burner apps. I never answered. He left voicemails, his voice a strange cocktail of rage and desperation. At first, they were threats. He'd ruin me completely. He'd countersue for millions. He'd make sure I never worked in this town again. Then, as the days turned into weeks and his suspension from Sterling Ashworth dragged on, the tone shifted to pleading. He was sorry. He'd made a terrible mistake. He'd been hurt and wasn't thinking straight. He'd do anything to make it right, just make the lawsuit go away. Please, Maya, he begged in one rambling, drunken message. You're destroying my life. The irony was so profound it was almost comical. I saved every single voicemail. They were evidence. More importantly, they were a barometer of his crumbling world, and listening to them was like drinking a fine wine. Jessica used his panic to our advantage. With his income suspended, the financial bleed was becoming a hemorrhage. We pushed forward relentlessly, refusing any talk of settlement. We scheduled depositions for his bosses, the partners at the fund. We sent forensic experts to analyze the data from his work computer, which the company had been forced to hand over. We were tightening the noose day by day. I, in the meantime, focused on rebuilding. I took small freelance jobs, shooting headshots and product photos, anything to keep the lights on and pay the minimums on my credit cards. It was humbling, but it was honest work. I poured all my pain and rage into my personal projects, creating a series of stark, haunting self-portraits that explored themes of violation, identity, and survival. My art was becoming my therapy and my weapon. The trial date was set for a cold, gray morning in February, a year after my world had imploded. Walking up the steps of the New York County Supreme Court on Center Street felt surreal. The cavernous marble lobby buzzed with the anxious energy of 1,000 different dramas. Leo was already there, standing with his lawyers. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight, there were dark circles under his eyes, and his expensive suit hung on him like it belonged to another man. When he saw me, his face was a mask of desperation. He took a step toward me, but his lawyer put a hand on his arm, holding him back. I walked past without a single glance, my gaze fixed on the courtroom door. I felt no fear. I felt no pity. I felt nothing but the icy calm of a sniper who has their target in their sights. The trial itself was a blur of legal arguments and witness testimonies. Leo's lawyers tried to portray him as a man in love who had been driven to a moment of madness by a painful breakup. They tried again to paint me as the villain. But Jessica was magnificent. She dismantled their narrative piece by piece. She presented the evidence of his systematic, months-long campaign. She played his voicemails for the court to hear, the threats, the pathetic pleading. She put a digital forensics expert on the stand, who testified that Leo had used his work computer at Sterling Ashworth to upload the photos to over a dozen different websites during market hours. But the most powerful moment came when I took the stand. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I simply told the truth. I looked at the judge, a stern-faced woman who watched me with an unnerving intensity, and I told her what he had taken from me. Not just my privacy, but my sense of safety, my reputation, my career, my ability to trust. When I was done, the courtroom was silent. I risked a glance at Leo. He was staring down at the table, his face pale. He wouldn't look at me. He finally looked small. The verdict was set to be read the following week. Leaving the courthouse that day, stepping out into the biting February wind, I felt a sense of peace for the first time in a year. Whatever happened, I had told my story. I had taken my power back. The rest was just details. The day the verdict came in, the courtroom was packed. Word of the trial had spread, and there were reporters in the gallery. I sat beside Jessica, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Leo sat across the aisle, a ghost of the man I had once known. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. She put on her glasses and began to read from a prepared statement. Her words were a torrent, a scathing indictment of Leo's character and actions. She called his behavior a despicable act of digital age, cowardice, and a malicious campaign designed to inflict maximum psychological and professional harm. She spoke of the Courage it took for victims of such harassment to come forward. Then she got to the numbers. She awarded me $1.5 million for emotional distress and reputational damage. Then came the copyright claims. She found him guilty of 27 separate willful infringements. She awarded the maximum statutory damages for each. The total judgment against Leo was $550,000. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. I felt the air leave my lungs. Jessica put a steadying hand on my arm. Across the aisle, Leo's face had gone completely white. He looked like he was going to be sick. His lawyer was whispering frantically in his ear, but he didn't seem to hear. He just stared into space, his empire of arrogance and cruelty having just been leveled by a judge's gavel. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The verdict was public. The New York Post ran a story with the headline, "Hedge Fund Hotshot Fried in $5.5 million Revenge Porn Suit." His name was Mudd. Sterling Ashworth fired him officially the next day, citing their moral turpitude clause. With no job and a multi-million-dollar judgment against him, he was ruined. His lawyers tried to declare bankruptcy to shield his assets, but Jessica had anticipated that. The type of judgment awarded for willful and malicious injury is not dischargeable in bankruptcy. He had to pay. He was forced to liquidate everything. His stocks, his bonds, his art collection, his ridiculously expensive watch collection. It still wasn't enough. The final asset to go on the chopping block was his greatest prize. The symbol of his entire identity, his sprawling, multi-million-dollar apartment in Tribeca, with panoramic views of the Hudson River. It was to be sold at a public auction on the steps of the courthouse where he had been defeated. A few weeks later, I was scrolling through the auction listings online when I saw it. A clinical, emotionless post with photos of the empty rooms I knew so well. An idea, cold and brilliant and absolutely perfect, began to form in my mind. I called Jessica. "I have a crazy idea," I said. "How much of the judgment money has been collected so far?" She told me the number. It was more than enough. "Set up an LLC for me," I told her, a slow, wicked smile spreading across my face. Something anonymous. I feel like going to an auction. The auction was a pathetic affair, held on a drizzly Tuesday morning on the same courthouse steps I had walked so many times. A handful of bottom-feeding real estate developers and lawyers were there, looking to snag a deal. Leo was there too, as required by the court. He stood off to the side, looking hollowed out, a ghost at his own funeral. I stood at the back of the small crowd, wearing a simple raincoat and a hat pulled down low over my face. He didn't see me. He didn't see anyone. He was just a statue of a broken man. The bidding started low. The developers went back and forth, making small incremental bids. I waited, I let them tire themselves out. When the auctioneer was about to bring the gavel down for what seemed like the final time, I raised my hand. $2.5 million, I said, my voice clear and steady. A murmur went through the crowd. The other bidders dropped out immediately. "Sold!" the auctioneer cried, banging his gavel. To the representative from North River Holdings, LLC. I stepped forward and signed the paperwork, my hand not shaking in the slightest. 2 weeks later was the eviction day. I had arranged for Jessica to be there to handle the final transfer. I stood across the street, watching from the window of a coffee shop. I saw the marshals go in. A few minutes later, Leo came out, carrying a single cardboard box with his few remaining personal effects. He looked lost, adrift. Jessica walked up to him, her expression unreadable. She said something to him and handed him an envelope. He opened it. Inside was a single document, the deed, now bearing the name of my LLC, and a cashier's check for the small amount of surplus from the auction sale, as required by law. And tucked behind it, a single business card. It just had my name on it, Maya Lynn, photographer. I saw the moment of realization dawn on his face, the confusion, the disbelief, and then the utter, soul-crushing understanding. He looked up, his eyes scanning the street frantically, and for a moment, his gaze met mine through the coffee shop window. There was no anger left in his eyes, just a vast, empty expanse of defeat. I didn't smile. I just held his gaze, took a slow sip of my coffee, and then watched as he turned and walked away, a man with nothing but a box of memories, disappearing into the city that had devoured him. I'm standing in the middle of the apartment now. It's completely empty, scrubbed clean of his existence. The late afternoon sun streams through the massive windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It's quiet. The only sound is the distant hum of the city below. I spent weeks renovating, tearing out the ostentatious cold decor he favored and replacing it with clean lines and warm woods. I made it my own. Yesterday, the last piece arrived. It's a large framed photograph, the only thing hanging on the vast white walls of the living room. It's the portrait I was developing that day, the one I took of him, sitting by the window in my old Brooklyn apartment. The light is soft, catching the kindness in his eyes, the kindness I now know was just a mask. He's smiling, a gentle, easy smile. He looks happy. He looks safe. He looks like a man who has everything. He wanted to expose me to the world, so I took his world and left him with nothing but a single perfect picture of the man he used to be. The end.